Well, I want to welcome you into New Day Church today. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, my name is John, and I have the privilege of being the senior pastor here at New Day. And if I haven't met you yet, I'd love for you to stick around. I'd love to meet you personally after the service, hear about your story, pray for you if I can pray for you. I know life is not easy, but God does good things even in the hard things that we face. And so we just want to offer you that hope today and offer you God's goodness in all things. If you're watching online, I want to say thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching now or later. We always hear stories of people that have checked out the service or the messages, and just thank you for all the feedback and the encouragement that we get. What an incredible time we have today where we can really share the hope of Jesus in so many different ways. And so just thank you for tuning in if you're watching online. And I want to preach to you a message today entitled Finding Hope in Tragedy. And you probably saw the horrific events that happened in Uvalde, Texas, just a few hours from here this past week. Just a few hours from here, now recorded as one of the greatest mass shootings in the history of our nation. And it probably hit you, it probably saddened you that something like that would happen. And for me, there was a unique connection to this because my daughter goes to one of the schools here in the community, and because of COVID, there's been a lot of restrictions and a lot of things we've not been able to do. We can't go on campus, a lot of things like that. But thankfully, those restrictions recently have lessened, and so we were actually going to be able to go on campus to see her. They call it their portfolio, to see all the work they've done and see her classroom and just kind of everything she's done this year. And so when we went to that this past week, it was exciting. And we got to see Molly and see her classroom. I forgot to put a picture up here, but it was a wonderful time, and she was so proud to show me all that she had done and where she sits in her classroom, and I got to see her teacher again. It was a really exciting time. And yet, when I look back on it, what was really unfortunate was as we were leaving our daughter's school was actually the moment that the events in Uvalde were beginning to take place. To like the minute that we were leaving the school, a very different situation was happening to a very different school just a few hours away from us. And there are always tragedies that happen, and especially with social media now, we hear about them more frequently today. We're more acquainted with them, and yet for some reason, this one just uniquely seemed to hit a lot of people, myself, but also a lot of people that I was talking to. And so I just want to take a moment to talk about that today. I had another message planned, but I want to step into this moment and speak to it, because the question that we all have is, how do we respond to this kind of situation and this kind of tragedy in general? I think the confusing part of things like this is we feel two competing emotions that we have to kind of hold in tension. On one side, we feel helpless. We feel helpless, and we know that we can't control everything, and in some ways it feels like there's nothing that we can do. But on the other hand, we feel compelled that we have to do something, and we're supposed to do something. So it's a hard tension to manage. I feel helpless, but I also feel like I have to do something. And so we want to speak to that today, and we want to be reminded that in Christ we are called to bring light into the darkness, that Jesus himself called us as his church, literally the light of the world. And so we're going to be all throughout the Bible today, and yet I want to begin our time just reading one verse, and I'm not going to invite you to stand today because it's only 2 words. Our main scripture reading for today, I'm just going to be in John 11, verse 35, and it simply says this: Jesus wept. May God bless the reading of that word today. In this story, Lazarus, a friend of Jesus, died. And as Lazarus was sick, his sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word for Jesus that Jesus would come and heal him from his sickness. And yet whenever Jesus gets there, it took him too long to get there, and Lazarus has already passed away. And so when Jesus shows up, Lazarus is already gone, and Mary and Martha are grieving, and they're sad, and they're broken. It's a tragedy. And yet what is interesting is before Jesus does anything, because he is going to heal Lazarus to show that he has all power, that he has all authority, that he is the one true God, he's going to heal Lazarus. And yet before he does that, before he does anything, the Bible just says that Jesus weeps. That Jesus grieves with them, that Jesus sees, that Jesus cares, that Jesus feels it too, that Jesus hates it too, and Jesus enters into the pain. See, sometimes I feel like we think that Jesus, he's like a holy robot or something. Like he doesn't feel anything, that he's just always like spitting out truth and, doesn't get too emotional, too feely. And yet all throughout the scriptures, we see Jesus stepping in emotionally into hurting and broken places, almost as if stepping into the pain and the hurt is actually the first step of redemption to anything. And the reason is because that actually is the first step. And so when we ask the question today, how do we respond to tragedies, whether they be in our nation, in our city, or even in our personal lives, the first thing that we must see that so often we're not familiar or acquainted with is, number one, we lament to God and we lament with others. When we feel anger, when we feel frustration, when we feel sadness, the problem is we tend to run away from God. We think, well, that's not a holy feeling, that's not a holy emotion, I shouldn't think that, I shouldn't feel that. And yet what we learn in the scriptures is that actually the place for negative emotions or difficult emotions is actually with God. That when we feel those things, God calls us to draw near to him and to bring those feelings to him. When we feel bewildered with life, or we don't understand something, or even why God would allow something, the Bible says that we bring that to God. I love this idea that faith isn't fake. And faith doesn't mean that we kind of push things down like they're not there or like they don't exist. That we come to God and lament in our frustrations with other people or with ourselves, or even our frustration with God. Sometimes as a parent, when your kid does something, I'm learning this in my parenting journey, like your kid says something they shouldn't say or says something wrong to you, and it's like the classic thing where you tell them, you better not say that again. Or a lot of times what we do is like, okay, we're going to give you a redo there. You shouldn't have said that. You're going to go say what you should have said, and we're going to act like what you said, the bad thing, never happened. And yet what is interesting is as we read lament in the scriptures, when people are crying out to God about why things happen, that's not how God responds to us. That somehow God wants us to lament to him. We see it all throughout scripture. The problem is we don't tend to focus on those scriptures. Listen, the hope is good, the hope is important, and we do have hope, absolutely. But at the end of the day, we're called to bring all of our feelings and all of our thoughts to God. We see this in Psalm 13, verses 1 through 2. This is one of those passages that I often think it's like, is that really in the Bible kind of passage? Like, are we allowed to say this? In Psalm 13, the psalmist, crying out to God, says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me?" That the psalmist cries out to God, and that not only does he have that moment, but God literally puts it in his holy scriptures as a pattern for us to follow. See, the reason why we can bring our lament and our frustration to God is because he is God and he is sovereign. He is not weak. He can handle it. He can take it. God is not insecure. And God knows that he's not ultimately controlled by our emotions, so we can express them to him. And listen, lament looks different for everybody, depending on your personality and how you're wired. For some people, lament is crying. For some people, lament is anger. For some people, lament is reflection. Sometimes it's being quiet. Sometimes it's being loud. It's different for everybody. But lament is actually one of the ways that we express hope. Because when we lament or say, why or how does this happen, or I can't imagine why this would happen, what we're actually saying is, God, I know you have something better. I know there's something better than this tragedy. I am so aware that this is not how it's supposed to be. That in fact, we should be worried if these things don't hit us, or they don't drive us to lament, or they don't drive us to tears, or they don't drive us to frustration, or however you want to express your lament. But the collective culture's lamenting of these tragedies and thinking about what that must have been like and how awful it must have been is actually one of the ways that we express hope. What basis does the atheist have to lament? There is no logical basis why they would ever lament, because who is to say what should be and what shouldn't be? What basis does the agnostic or the person that purely has a secular worldview, what basis is there ever for lament? How can you lament if there wasn't supposed to be something better in the first place? And it's in lament that we're deeply reminded that God has a good plan for the world, and we long for that. It's in our lament and our sadness and our frustration that we feel the true weight of sin and our sin as well. These things happen because people sin, which means they do things God said not to do. God said not to murder. God said not to steal. God said not to have adultery. And so when we look at these things, we don't just look at other people and say, why do they do bad things? We ask ourselves, why do we do things that contribute to the brokenness in this world? And in lament, we also find our great need for Christ to return and make all things new. That the Bible says we are waiting for Christ to return and to make all things new. And we often say, well, why does he tarry? Why does he delay? And the Bible says God delays because more people, or he longs for more people to be saved, and he has more good things yet to be done. And so we wait patiently. And so we lament to God in this. We don't hop right into action. We don't just need to spring and do something to cover up our sadness. We can express it, but also we lament to others and with others. I love Romans 12:15. It says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. I love it because we enter into other people's situations and their pain. And do you know what empathy is at its core? Empathy is reminding somebody that they are not alone in their pain or their frustration or their sadness. When we empathize, when we cry with somebody, when we feel for them, we're saying, listen, I feel this alongside of you. And I might not be able to fully understand it. In fact, I know I can't fully understand it, but I'm trying. Because the great lie of the enemy in tragedy is that we are alone. And the great lie of the enemy in our personal tragedy is that we are alone. And yet it is in empathy that God reminds us that we are not alone, but he is with us in our pain, and that God has given us a community in the flesh to be with us as well. And so we lament to God and we lament with others, but we are called to do something. And so the second thing that we do is that we serve those suffering. We serve those who are suffering. I love Galatians 6, verse 2, when it says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And I love in 1 John 3:18, it says, little children, let us love not in word or talk, but in deed and truth. Meaning, don't just say you love somebody. Don't just give an emotional word. Like, love them in action and in practicality. See, Jesus taught us that serving others is actually the true measure of greatness in life. And there's a common thing that people say right now, which actually I think Jesus would agree with when they say thoughts and prayers are not enough. The answer is that's true. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Jesus did more than just give thoughts and prayers. Jesus sprung into action. He did not just pray that someone would get cleaned. He literally got on his knees and he washed feet with his own two hands. And as Christians, everywhere we go, we should serve because we love to serve. That's why we invite members of our church to serve in the church in one way or another, just because we love serving. It's fun. It's life-giving. It's not a burden. It's hard at times, but it's more fulfilling spiritually than it is costly physically or mentally. You know, one of the interesting things, I didn't realize this till I heard somebody mention it, that maybe you remember back in the late 90s, I think it was 97, when Princess Diana tragically died in a car crash. She was a famous kind of celebrity princess in Britain, and, you know, she was in the spotlight, and she definitely owned it when you go back and look at how she kind of lived her life. She was literally royalty, and everybody was interested in her, and she was famous, and she was admired. And she tragically passed away in a car crash in 1997. And what people often don't realize is that there was actually another world-famous woman that also passed away in 1997, literally in the same week, but a very different kind of person that chose a very different path to greatness. And it was Mother Teresa. In the same week, the world grappled with the reality of Princess Diana and Mother Teresa both passing away. And what's often pointed out is they were both influential figures, they were both great, they were both admired, and yet they chose radically different paths to greatness. And what is interesting is we so often look at celebrities or famous people or royalty or people that have power, and we think, man, like, it must be great to be like them. And yet the problem is so few of us could ever be that. There's not a lot of availability to become British royalty. And I don't know the odds, but we all probably have a negative 0% chance of ever becoming a prince or a princess or a king of Britain. It's a level of greatness that we can't contain, and yet what is interesting is anybody can be Mother Teresa. Anybody can serve, and anybody can make a difference in that way. And yet so often we're focused on celebrity, which is so random, and if we're honest, it's so shallow. Which is why it makes sense that Jesus says, the greatest among you, Matthew 28, will be your servant. When people serve, or when people suffer, we lament with them, but we also step in and serve. We ask the question, how can I help? A servant does what is ever needed. How can I help? I love in Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens. And so it's like, your life is heavy or your burden is heavy. How can I help you carry that? What can I do to lessen at least a little bit the burden on your life because of what you're going through? You see, in lament, we look to God for what we can't do, but in service, we help out in the ways and the things that we can do. You know, in our journey, in our family, as my wife walks through cancer and we process that and we suffer and it's a challenge and it's a trial and it's a very heavy burden what we are walking through right now. And there have been a lot of ways that people have blessed us. People have, they've done our laundry for us. People have, I had started a project in my backyard with my deck. I was not gonna be able to finish it. I probably couldn't have finished it no matter what happened, but some people came and just rebuilt our back deck. And another helpful thing that many of you have helped us with is you've brought us meals. And it might seem like a small thing. It might seem like not that big of a deal or what difference would that make? And can I just tell you that over these last 5 or 6 months, if you've brought us a meal or if you've helped us in any way, it has been more of a help than you realize. Because when you go through something like we're going through, even the smallest things can be the greatest crushing weights at times. You have no idea how many times we got off work after a hard day or a hard report or everything, it seems like it's going wrong, and we come home, and if we'd had to figure out the meal on our own or even pay for it because we don't have time to make it, any one of those things could have been just a crushing weight to that day, the straw that broke the camel's back. And yet there was a meal on the front porch. And it's one less thing that we have to figure out today or to do. But there's a weight and there's a burden. And someone said, I can do that. And it literally lightened the load on us that day. In the church, we bear one another's burdens together. We walk together and we help each other out. Serving others is lessening the burden. And I'll be honest, I even looked into some ways that we could help out with Uvalde. And if I'm honest, there are so many people helping them. It's a national thing. I mean, they've got money, they've got help, they've got support. And it just reminded me of maybe the importance of it is good to help with the big things, the national things, but I think maybe in some ways even more important to look locally. What are the local tragedies or the local situations where there's pain that maybe don't have the notoriety, that don't get the support? What are the things that maybe nobody sees? The people that are suffering in silence, and how can we radically make a difference in those people's lives by simply letting them know that they are not alone and lightening the burden where we can? In times of tragedy, we lament, but we also suffer alongside them. And we help. And yet, for a lot of people, that's kind of where we stop. And those are good things to do. But I want to give you a couple more things that I think are important uniquely for the moment that we are in. As I really kind of prayed to the Lord this week and thought about, man, what's important today in this moment in time that God has destined us to live in. And I want to offer you two more things that maybe we often don't do in moments of tragedy, but I think specifically we should do, especially because of the moment that we live in. I think when tragedy strikes and we're trying to bring hope into tragedy, one thing that we often miss is the importance of making peace. And I say this today because we have to consider the moment in time that we live in. And we live in a very polarized culture and society. We live in a culture that is literally going through a culture war. And so you know this, every time something like this happens, it quickly becomes a political issue. Masks are political, schools are political, these kind of tragedies are political. Everything becomes political, and people go back and forth, and people fight, and it's really complicated. And yet I want to remind us that Jesus says in Matthew 5, verse 9, that blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. That Jesus says, not blessed are the dividers, but blessed are the uniters. And then Romans 12, verse 16, right after Paul says the passage we just read about weep with those who weep, he goes on to say, verse 16, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. And when I look out into the culture and when I read social media, I don't see a bunch of people trying to, as much as it depends on them, to live peaceably with all. You see, as Christians, we are peacemakers because we reflect the gospel in everything that we do. And in the gospel, Jesus Christ reconciled us to God. He was the Son of God. He comes into the world. He was one with God to die on the cross for our sins and to rise again. And because of what he did, he reconciled us to God, Ephesians 2 says. But Ephesians 2 also says that also he reconciled us to one another. Jew, Gentile, white, black, Hispanic, rich, poor, that he reconciles us together because he cleanses us of our sin. He cleanses us of our self-righteousness. He humbles everybody. And so if we've been humbled, we can get along with anybody. Doesn't mean that we agree with everybody, but we aim for unity and peace, as Paul says in Romans, as far as it depends on us. You see, because where division is happening, Satan is at work. And where unity is breaking through, God is at work. Where there is division in your marriage, Satan is at work in your marriage. Where there is division in your relationships, Satan is so excited about that. And when there is division in a nation, Satan loves that, and he is hard at work. And yet in Psalm 133, it says, behold how good and pleasing it is when brothers and sisters dwell together in unity. It's a good thing. It's God didn't design the world to be divided. And so when the world is divided, it's not living up to what God planned for it. And yet it's hard. It's not easy to make peace in life or in relationships. It reminds me of a famous C.S. Lewis quote. C.S. Lewis was a famous author in the 20th century who was an atheist for most of his life, got saved later in life, and wrote a lot of books that have been a great influence and a great blessing to the church at large about Christianity. And he had this saying about forgiveness, and it's so true. He said, forgiveness is a great idea. Forgiveness is a lovely idea until you have something to forgive. And then it's like, I'll pass. I don't know, that's not lovely. I think peace is the same way. Peace is a lovely idea. Making peace is a lovely idea. We love it. And so we have to step into a hard place and make peace in a way that makes us uncomfortable. See, making peace is hard in this moment in time because every issue you step into, there are two teams that are quickly grabbing you to be on their side. And everybody has this mentality today, if you're not for us, you're against us. It makes us insecure. I don't want to be against anybody. So maybe I need to join a team. And it's hard because we have our own opinions and our own thoughts. And they might even be right. Your opinions might be true. It might be correct. You might be totally right about this issue. And yet you're still called to be a peacemaker, even amongst people that disagree with you. Because think about it, even when somebody wrongs you, you're still called to make peace. That's what forgiveness is. And how cool would it be if today the church were peacemakers? Because I agree with you, we cannot compromise conviction. And if you come here and you're a part of New Day and you hear our teaching, you know that we have deep convictions that we do not compromise. We teach what the Bible teaches. But the problem with that is the Bible teaches peace and peacemaking. And so we can't lose our convictions, but we also can't give up on constantly longing to make peace. The same way we said, we can't compromise our convictions, you're right. And you can't compromise the conviction that we are called to be peacemakers in this world. And so often as Christians, we're just cold. And we don't live like Paul in 1 Corinthians 9 when Paul says, I've become all things to all people that by all means I might save some. Paul says, I'm a missionary, and when I'm with the Jews, I do it this way. When I'm with the Gentiles, I do it this way. I don't care about how it's done. I just know that I'm called to bring people to Jesus. And so what we need to be mindful of is the moment that we live in. And I'm all about looking back and respecting, Charles Spurgeon and Billy Graham, but they lived in a different time, in a different world, in a different culture. And we're going to have to be different in some ways to them if we're going to reach our people. And they did great things because they reached their moment in time. And so the question as Christians is, what does it look like to carry our convictions, but with love and with a winsome attitude? That if we love the truth, and yet we know that the way that we present the truth drives people away from the truth, do we really love the truth? Because if we love the truth, we want people to come to know the truth. And so I just say that because, listen, I know all of us have convictions, and I know a lot of issues come up in different kinds of tragedies. Yet the question that I ask today is how do we minister to these tragedies by not making it even worse, by bringing division into it? What makes it worse is when a tragedy happens and there's mourning and there's suffering, and then all anyone is ever talking about is the political consequence of this, as opposed to the hurting families that are grieving. And can we also have the humility to know that a lot of these issues are really complex? It's very complex. I've learned this in relationships. I've learned this in marriage. It's not always easy. If it was easy, we'd all do it. These issues are complex. It's hard to live in a world where you say, well, there's crazy people and they're going to have guns. And so, it's not unreasonable to want to defend yourself. I get that. I also get the idea that there are crazy people. And so the idea that they can get guns is kind of scary. I get that too. It's complicated. I don't know. And yet I just wonder if we could empathize and speak in love, that maybe some fresh idea could emerge. That maybe if we were people of peace, maybe God would bless that in a way that we never even saw coming. Once again, we don't compromise convictions, and we shouldn't do the wrong or the stupid thing. But we're called to make peace, and I think that as a church, we should be working towards that in every way. And then lastly, and most importantly, when it comes to tragedy, to trial, to suffering, to issues, as Christians, we get to be a voice of hope. That we are a voice of hope in Jesus. That John 3:16 and verse 17, man, hear this out. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. That the Bible says in Romans 28 that God works all things together for good. The Bible also says that what the enemy meant for harm, that God has used for good. We're saying God doesn't do evil, but God uses evil to do good. And the way I see hardship or trials or tragedies in life is it's almost like kind of tilling up the soil of your life. We're tilling up the soil of a culture. And if you're a planter and you're really good at it, like I'm not good at it, I've learned you have to till up the soil. You have to kind of break it apart so that the new thing you're planting can get roots in the ground. And there's just something about tumultuous moments and tumultuous times where there's an opportunity for new seeds to be planted into the ground and new seeds to be planted into our life. And God uses that for good. And so often we maybe are kind of hesitant to share the gospel or tell people about Jesus because, well, I don't think they want to hear about it, or they might not respond to it, or what if I invite them to church and they don't come? And and I get all those things, but we have to remember it's like planting seeds. You never know quite what the harvest is going to look like or where it's going to come from, but can I tell you that there is a harvest when you are faithful? Galatians says, do not grow weary in doing good, but in due season you will reap. That when we are faithful to tell people about Jesus or to invite them into spiritual conversations, that God uses it. And sometimes it's not like we think. Sometimes it's exactly like we think. Sometimes it's nothing like we think, but God uses it for good. That Jesus changes lives. And moments like this, we have a unique opportunity as Christians to offer people hope. Once again, what hope does the atheist offer? What hope does the agnostic offer? What hope does the secular humanist offer who says, man, as a collective human society, we can figure it out on our own? And then you look at collective human society and it's like, I don't know, to me it looks pretty divided and pretty evil and pretty broken and pretty selfish. But we have a hope beyond ourselves. We have a God who loves us and who loves us even in our brokenness, and we have opportunities to share that. There's a guy that I went to high school with here in the community, and this was a really, really rough guy. If you knew him back in the day, he was the classic, gangbanger type of guy. And he was kind of living his life and doing his thing. And if you saw this guy at 17, but then you saw him today in his mid-30s, you would think, what in the world happened to him? He's a radically different person. He gave his life to Jesus. He's on fire for the Lord. He's got a wife and a kid, and he's just like leading his family so well. I mean, he is a radically different person, sold out for Jesus. And if you were to look at these two guys, you would think to yourself, something between 17 and like 35, like something massive must have happened in his life. Something radical must have happened. And the answer is something did happen. One of his friends, who's also a mutual friend of mine, tragically passed away when he was finishing up high school. That mutual friend that we had was a Christian and went to church, and so they did the funeral in the church, and he went to the church and he heard the gospel. He didn't immediately respond, but it messed him up in a sense. He began to think about it and meditate on it. His friend passing away really kind of opened his eyes to like the reality of life and death and just what am I doing with my life? It kind of wakes you up from a slumber, if you will. And he eventually gave his life to Jesus. And it is not an understatement to say his life was radically transformed. He is literally a different person in Christ. You see, a moment of tragedy became an opportunity for him to hear about hope and to hear about Jesus. And there's ways in which we do that, but can I just tell you that I think we actually live in a moment in time where it's probably never been easier to share hope. It's never been easier to tell people about Jesus. It's never been easier to invite people to church than it is right now. Because we know deep down that God created us for more than the brokenness that we see, and we have the hope, and we have the answer. May I encourage you to be bold in moments like this and to be a voice of hope in Jesus. And so as we draw to a close today, I just want to encourage you this week to really let the state of things swirl around in your soul long enough and to think about these ways that we respond for long enough to really think through how God is calling you to respond. We don't want to be people who hear about these things and think about it for a week and just kind of move on with our lives like normal. We want to be people who are transformed by these things, that God will grow us through them, but also that we make a difference in the lives of people around us. And if I can leave you with one verse for tragedy or one verse for hardship in your life, maybe the best verse I could ever give you is actually at the very end of the Bible, in the last chapter. It's Revelation 21, verse 4. It says that he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And that as we communicate hope in a world full of so much tragedy, we get to carry the message that says that where there is tragedy, God isn't finished. That where there is tragedy, where there is sadness, where there is brokenness, there are things that God has yet to do in this moment, because our God is a redeemer. He redeems things. He redeems the broken world. He redeemed us when we were far from him. He's a redeemer. He's someone who turns the table for good. And there's so many ways that you can see this, but one of my favorite to think about, which is pretty amazing, is that, in the ancient world, in the Roman Empire, the cross was the most despised symbol in the culture. The cross, where they would crucify people, was seen as a universal symbol of death and despair. It was so despised that you would not have anything in your house that resembled a cross. You wouldn't want to have anything in your house that looked in that shape, and you definitely wouldn't want to have a cross, because you would not want to trigger that thought, because it communicated death and despair. Crucifixion was invented by the Persians back in the day, but the Romans perfected it. It was the worst way to die, that would drag out the pain and would also humiliate you. And so when Jesus was crucified, they didn't just kill Jesus, they crucified him, and they really despised him because he claimed to be God. Because he was a voice of hope in a world of brokenness and sin. And so Jesus goes to the cross and Jesus dies, but then Jesus rises again and the church is birthed. And the church began to radically carry this thing called the cross as a symbol of hope. And people thought they were crazy. And what's amazing is today the cross is considered to be the most recognizable symbol in all the world. And it is a universal symbol of hope and new life. But it used to be just about death and despair. And the reason is because God can change anything. God can transform anything. He does it all the time. And so where there is tragedy, where there is hardship in your life, can I tell you, God isn't finished. And I promise you, he's not finished. You don't watch your favorite movie and turn it off right in the middle. You watch it all the way through. And so we have a great hope, even in the midst of tragedy, that we don't have to fake it, that we can be honest about where we're at or how we feel. But we can begin the work through serving people, through making peace, and through offering hope in Jesus. That we can be a voice of hope until the day, as Revelation 21 verse 4 says, that he will wipe away every tear from their eye, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away.